I've been doing some research for a paper, and I've been paying particular attention to the destruction of schools. And I think we're up to 87% of school buildings have been damaged or destroyed. All 12 universities have been destroyed, not to mention all the other killing of students, teachers, etc. We see the destruction of museums and mosques and all these things, right? It's not just what some have called spatiocide, but it's also a certain commitment to what some have called herbicide, or the destruction of a city, not just the physical built environment, but the things that make a city, the things that comprise civil society, all that gone. And as you mentioned, an unimaginable amount of rubble. And now the Israeli state, as you argue, has a kind of a claim, a disingenuous one, but a claim for why it can't be rebuilt, why you can't have cement, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By that, when I hear all of that, it sounds like Gaza can't be rebuilt, but there are still, even if we take the most liberal estimates of the death rates, and we say, let's say 300, 400,000 Palestinians have been killed, and it might be 500,000 by the end, God forbid, right? We're still talking about 1.7 million people in Gaza without civil infrastructure. What does that look like?
I think it's an important question. First of all, the aim was to obliterate Gaza. That's why the attacks on the hospitals were so important to Israel, because a hospital it's symbolic of the most fragile display, embodiment of civilization. And when in any human rights covenant, there's always special protection for hospitals. Hospitals have a unique status as the most fragile reed, you might call it, of civilization. And when Israel targeted the hospitals, it was transmitting the message that we are obliterating every aspect of Gaza's civilization. There is no safe space in Gaza, not just in terms of the physical survival of Gaza, but in terms of its civilizational status. We're going after the hospitals, the universities, everything that represents the civilization of Gaza. As to what will happen, my guess, obviously, it's purely speculative. As you know, population movements are vast in the world today, not least in the Middle East. There are 2.5 million Syrians in Turkey. There are 1.5 million Syrians in Lebanon. So the entire population of Gaza, let's round it off, assuming, we'll take away the people who have left, the deaths, it'll be about 2 million. And my belief, obviously it's speculation, is faced with the prospect that Gaza cannot be rebuilt because of the rubble, which will take 10 to 15 years to clear, and can't be rebuilt because Israel won't allow in cement, which is what happened after Protective Edge. It's forgotten that when the Mavi Marmara humanitarian convoy went to Gaza, it carried 10,000 tons of humanitarian aid. Most of it was cement, because Israel wasn't allowing in cement after Operation Cast Lead to rebuild Gaza. So the idea of not allowing in cement is not something novel, but this time Israel will have the wonderful pretext of the Hamas tunnels, which, in my opinion, I can't prove it. I think it's been vastly exaggerated. Sinwar said there were 300 miles of tunnels. Already, I think that's nonsense. And then the Israel started to say 450 miles of tunnels, which, of course, the New York Times immediately reprinted as fact. If the whole New York City subway system, and Mark, you know our subway system, the total number of tunnels is 430 miles.
Right.
So you're telling me that Gaza had a more complex tunnel system than the New York City subways? No, that doesn't sound plausible to me. But they're going to use that as a pretext for saying Hamas is going to steal the cement and build more tunnels, and it's going to be an existential threat to Israel. So I can't see how it will be rebuilt. I think by hook or by crook, Gazans will find their way out. And
but to where, Norm? I mean, you know, it's one thing when you talk.
Yeah, as I said, nobody even asks the question to where when it comes to Ukrainian refugees, to where when it comes to Syrian refugees. We're talking about a world where there are just vast refugee movements. Even in the case of Gaza, Egypt has not allowed more than 60,000 Gazans to stay at any given time. So if about 200,000, the estimates are between 150 to 200,000 have gotten out, that would mean probably about 150,000 have already found a way to another part of the world. I can't give you the logistics. That just seems to me how this is going to end. And it's not going to be a happy ending, in my opinion. It's not, I don't want to be a bearer of bad news, but I also believe that the most important thing when an event like this happens is you have to learn lessons. You have to have clarity, otherwise you can't move forward. So I don't think illusions are useful. The African leader Amilcar Cabral, he was the leader of this tiny liberation movement in Africa called the PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau. He's a forgotten figure, but he said he once gave a speech, and the speech resonated for me. The title of the speech was "Tell No Lies, Claim No Easy Victories." Tell no lies, claim no easy victories. And as I said, that I internalized that we don't want rhetoric, we don't want bluster. There's quite enough of that. We don't need more of it. Tell no lies, claim no easy victories. And we have to be clear-headed about what happened. And I think a civilization has been destroyed. And then how do we proceed? And I don't have an answer to that because I have no idea how this is going to end even. So we can't really talk about how to proceed.
Fair enough. Norman Finkelstein, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. I know you have to run. I appreciate it.
I don't want to give the impression that, I know Susan's going to talk. I'm very happy and eager to listen to her, but I had a prior appointment and I have to stick to it. So thank you both.
Norm, we're going to see each other soon in London, I think. So let's talk.
I'm a little confused about that, so we should talk about it because I got just an email today and it seems I had the wrong date. So we'll talk.
Y'all talk,
okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would like to just end by saying, Susan, that a lot of what you say, I agree with. I don't have a problem with it, and I think just two things. I'm gone, and you can, talk behind my back. I know. I would say two things. I would say that when we start straying too far from basic humanitarian principles, collapsing the distinctions between civilian and combatant, when we start to stray too far, I think we start getting into very, let's just call it problematic territory. I agree the distinctions aren't always right. I agree that the distinctions aren't applied fairly, even-handedly, but I think we have to always be cautious about straying too far from them, because we don't want to legitimize things which humanity attempted to curb, unsuccessfully for sure, but attempted to curb. I would say personally, the thing I hate most when I hear reportage from Gaza, which just today I was reading 45 wonderful doctors put out a wonderful statement, but I can't stand when I hear people refer to women and children as if they're the only innocents in Gaza. What about men?
No. Yeah,
What
no,
about
absolutely.
men? Aren't they? You know,
I agree with you.
the standard human rights distinction has always been between combatants versus civilians. But suddenly,
except the Middle East, because think about what we did with the Taliban. It's like if you're brown and 16 and out, and you're a combatant just by virtue.
Yeah. And so suddenly with Gaza, they've collapsed the distinction. They've replaced the standard distinction between combatants and civilians. Now it's between women and children and men. And so men have become a legitimate target in Gaza. So that too, to me, is a regression from basic humanitarian standards. And we should say, no, I'm not using, as the expression is, women and children as a proxy for civilians. No, men are civilians too. And the other thing I would say, Susan, is remember, Hamas itself denied that they targeted civilians. They said we did not target civilians. They claimed, various permutations and combinations. They said it was the third wave of non-Hamas, militants. They were responsible for.
Hamas said mistakes were made. They said that we targeted we targeted only combatants, but mistakes were made. That's what Hamas said.
Right, but my point is, even they acknowledge the distinction between combatants and civilians. So they don't reject that distinction. So I don't think we should be more pious than the Pope.
I don't think I rejected that distinction either, but I do reject this total innocence of all Israelis, no matter what, which the media promulgates. And I also want to say too that, some of this sort of be careful where you stray, this kind of language is what they used to say to Malcolm X too. It's that we always have to watch our language. We who've had our hearts carved out over and over have to watch what we say. And
I think you misunderstood me. I don't care about the language. I said the consequences of completely disregarding the distinction between civilians and combatants. It can end up in a very ugly place. I don't care much.
So if I understand you correctly, just for clarity's sake, you're saying that if we accept that all Israelis are at some level complicit and culpable, and there is no distinction between civilians and non-civilians, then you're saying that could create a kind of a slippery slope in terms of how we navigate. Okay.
Yeah, but I want to make sure that, but I want to be clear, that's not what I was saying.